On this podcast, I often talk with guests about the waves they're making in Web3, and yet it always feels a little off as 99% of my day is spent on Web2, even if I am talking about Web3. LinkedIn and Twitter, while major hubs for Web3 chatter and community, are very much Web2. And so it was refreshing to have a guest speak to this dichotomy and share the idea that not everything needs to be Web3, and that we, as he is currently doing, will likely continue to mix the best elements of Web2 with Web3 to make the gradual slide into Web3 more of an evolution rather than a revolution that allows the tech to catch up with our lofty Web3 dreams, where everything is on chain. This episode's guest is Brent Craige, and we sat down in his hometown of New Orleans to discuss how he's putting the Big Easy on the Web3 and crypto map with his projects NFTeacher and JamAround. NFTeacher currently is leveraging, and JamAround will leverage blockchain to shift paradigms and build a future, like with all Web3, that will allow more people to create on their own terms while actively building community. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. Brent, welcome to More Than Blockchain. How you doing?
How you doing? What's going on with you, man? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well. I'm down here in New Orleans.
Yeah. Here
we are.
Easy.
It's very warm today.
It's hot.
It had a real feel of 100 degrees. Now, I must say, I do enjoy the heat.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a certain amount of time to get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you hit extreme cold,
Yeah.
you need about a week or 2 weeks, and you need the proper gear.
Yeah, and then that humidity is different too. So that's another factor of this heat in particular. It's more so, it's not really that dry heat like you'll get in Texas. So it's like you sweating.
It's an actual swamp.
Yeah.
So I've been here a couple of days, and I'm so glad we were able to connect because doing it through Zoom, there's no problem with that. I've had great conversations through Zoom. We would connect well through Zoom. We're both obviously probably on video calls with people all the time.
All the time, right.
I live on video calls. Nothing wrong with that, but it's honestly very nice. And it almost feels like getting back to, I quote, normal. I'm throwing air quotes, coming from the pandemic, where I feel like I couldn't fly down here and I couldn't sit with you, and we couldn't do this because couldn't get a flight. There were precautions. There were this or that. You're not trying to get your people sick. I'm not trying to get my people sick. We have to worry about other people. So anyways, super glad to be here. And I got to say, the reason why we're here, I got to bring it back to Instagram, I believe it was. And I had seen a TikTok that you had done about your NFTeacher.
Oh, right.
And I was like, no, that's super cool. And maybe you can break down what that looks like, because what I really want to focus on, and this is a conversation I'm already having, is what does the metaverse offer for education, and what does education look like in the metaverse? So talk to me about how you wanted to leverage the metaverse or virtual reality environment to bring education to people seemingly around the globe.
When you think about the Web3 situation, there's two components to it. You have the ownership, which is powered by blockchain technology. Then you have the immersion, which is powered by the virtual reality, the augmented reality type of situation. So I went to Tuskegee University. I studied political science, and I graduated in 2016. After I graduated, I pretty much didn't even touch my degree. My degree is still on the mantle that it was at.
Dusty.
Dusty. If it wasn't for the little plastic film that was in front of it, it would be super dusty. But it sat there and it's collected dust. And I wouldn't say that I got my return off investment off my degree education. I would say that I got the return from the relationships that I built while in school and the different things that I tried that manifested my media background, and then eventually led me into the blockchain, the music, videos, all of those types of things that I learned in school wasn't necessarily a part of my curriculum. And my professors also, I attribute to them for helping me grow and mature as a person. But I didn't use the actual information that I learned in school to monetize. So it was basically a wasted investment if I was to look at it from purely a curriculum perspective. What if there was a way for me to sell my entry into the college and recoup my investment just from the seat that I was granted to when I got into the university? And that's where NFTeacher started materializing, figuring out how we could get students returns without having them go and apply it into real life. And that's where the tokenomics come in play. So NFTeacher is essentially a blockchain learning academy. It was one of the first, I don't know if it's the first, but one of the first that was built on Ethereum. And I partnered with a couple of guys that I met through the Apes 3D NFT project. Every person that helped me build that project was a part of that community, Apes 3D. So That's another thing that I want to highlight: the community aspect in the building. It's super powerful. And we basically just wanted to create a learning environment for students that was built on chain, so that we can have different transparency measures. We can have different community events, different fun stuff that can happen over the internet. Because as we know, around that time, it was COVID, things were going on. It was super difficult to meet up. And that's when I first started getting into the Oculus, getting into the virtual reality, is when I started, just having a little extra downtime and figuring out ways to, explore and still monetize. I've always worked from home. Like I said, I never used my degree. I use skills that I've learned in school to, monetize and pay my bills. But that was an outlet that allowed for different levels of creativity. And it really started out as an experiment. And it started with my TikTok. My TikTok, it blew up to a certain degree.
When did you? I hate to
Yeah,
cut you off
yeah,
because you're in
yeah.
flow, but when did you open your TikTok?
Yeah, so I started my TikTok last summer. So it almost will be a year now. So in June. So
June of
last June,
2020.
2021. Yeah.
20. Oh, excuse me. We're
Yeah.
2022. Wow.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Yeah,
July
June.
of 2021.
Yeah.
You started your TikTok.
Yeah, June. And
June, excuse me. But
yeah.
so the question I have about that, and I also want to ask: so you start your TikTok in June of 2021. When did you start the NFTeacher?
Yeah, so I started NFTeacher in October of 2021.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
Go
yeah. I
back.
started in October. So I started my TikTok during the bear market last summer. It was supposed to be Solana summer, and it wound up being bear market summer. And this was the time when nobody really was talking about NFTs. Bored Apes had just minted around that time. Artifact was still doing sneaker drops. Decentralization was super popular. You could play blackjack and stuff in the casinos at the time. They weren't doing the poker, and it was just super. It was a super fun environment, and it was just an opportunity and the creativity that I was seeing everyone, contribute to this one ecosystem. It was just entertaining. And I stumbled across the Mana token. One of my co-founders for JamAround actually described what Mana was. He was telling me that he was surprised I didn't know what Decentraland was based off of my interest in virtual reality and all that type of stuff, NFTs and whatnot. So I went into Decentraland, read the white paper a couple times. I made a video on the white paper, word for word, reciting it verbatim, and it just like I was immersed in the whole fact that you can build an ecosystem from your actual computer and engage in an ecosystem that was decentralized. So that is what kind of boomed my TikTok, experimenting with different Web3 stuff, immersion stuff. I used to do a lot of the augmented reality stuff with the horses, and that kind of got the TikTok to a level of visibility to where now everyone's asking me questions. How do you do this? What is this? What is that? And Ape Father, who is the founder of the Ape 3D project, I still don't know his real name, still don't know what he looks like, but I've known him for over a year, like 6 months now, 7 months. I've been in 2 contracts with him. Good guy. He informed me he told me that I should make a consultation token. So a lot of people were asking me questions. He was saying if you come up with a token that gives access to you, then that's something that can work based off of the level of influence that I have. So that turned into NFTeacher because instead of doing a consultation token, something more scalable is to create a passive learning system and allow the token to gain entry to that. And then also give them the opportunity to use that token to, get meetings with me, do what I call office hours. So that's where the initial inspiration for it came. It was a lot of people asking me things. They didn't really know what was going on. I wanted to monetize it, but I wanted them to learn in the process of monetizing it. So instead of just doing a regular course where you paying me fiat currency and whatnot, I tokenized it because if you want to get access to this information, you need to understand the crypto first. You need to understand at least how to get a MetaMask wallet, and you need to understand how to mint an NFT. If you can learn that, then you're good enough, in my opinion, to learn what's really going on, and you're going to take it seriously. Because a lot of people just come in for the hype. So if you spend $25 on a course, you may just put it down somewhere. But if you did all this to even get in there, and now I'm going to do a little bit more engaging. And a couple of students have came and they've minted an NFT. They've learned what they needed to learn. I met them, and then they've sold it and then doubled their investment. So that proved the model right there that you can come in, you can learn, and before you even apply it, you can recoup your investment or even get more than that, and that's just based off of the opportunity that people get with the blockchain. And then that comes to how successful the school is. If the school isn't successful, then people aren't going to be promoting it, tokens aren't going to be moving, and the resales aren't going to be happening. So it's more of a decentralized community aspect. If this school needs to be successful, then all of the students need to play their part. in making it successful and even using the platform.
Yeah, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I have so many questions, and we don't have all day, so I'm
Right.
trying to organize my thoughts. But it's like what you said to me is a really fascinating thing, because if you were under 45, probably,
Hmm.
and you went to college, you went to grad school, you got a PhD, you went to medical school, you went to
Hmm.
law school, you have an advanced degree, as we'd say,
Right.
you probably have student debt.
Yeah.
Or if you don't have student debt, you once had student debt.
I still have.
Most people do. I do too. So what you're saying is like, come through, get the educational component,
Hmm.
which you're also saying. I think for me, I always learned in college, I learned just as much outside of the classroom as I did
Hmm.
within.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm here right now visiting one of my college buddies. He's a part of my network, and we're always just going to be able to support one another. And
Yeah.
really, at the end of the day, that is probably the most important part of your
Yeah.
college,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
the relationships I have with my mentors and my professors and stuff. So it's like, do you think this, what you've done, which I still am so blown away by it, and we're gonna continue to drill down more. Do you think this is something Harvard could do?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it can be alternatives. One thing that I'm an avid believer in is being in the middle. And not saying that you have to, not saying that I'm indecisive or whatnot, but you can't full decentralization is a myth. Full centralization is a myth. We've seen it because they've been trying to centralize the world every time. Web 1 was a attempt at decentralization. Then they re-centralized it. Then Web 2 was another attempt at it. They re-centralized it. So it's going to keep happening. And then when you see people try to go fully decentralized, it's also not going to happen because there are so many security issues and, what do you want your kids seeing? And, it's so many things in this social contract that we all sign that we have to abide by if we want to have some kind of sensible society. And I even saw Vitalik was tweeting about it last night. It's a lot of contradictions in the space. And I think that they can do it, but just as an alternative, you don't have to switch your complete ecosystem into Web 3. You can still facilitate your Web 2 options, but let's say you reserved around 100 Web 3 seats that you tokenized in like a Harvard paraphernalia gear or something like that, and you put those on the market and you sold those just to see how the resales would do. That's giving them a decentralized alternative, and it's a start because we don't really know the implications of how it will be at scale. So let's test it out. Let's see how it works, and let's see who can recoup off of that. And also for historical purposes is why a lot of colleges are looking to get this stuff done because they have so much history, so much stuff that could be tokenized and put on chain that could educate, that could immerse their students into the ecosystem, and that can empower them to, like we said, sell their seats. Let's say if you are Harvard, you got a scholarship. There was a certain type of scholarship that was Web3, and it came for the opportunity for you to sell your seat. Like we know how much a Harvard seat costs, so that's value in itself. And now you're giving that value to a student. Now that student is more invested into Harvard because now they're technically an investor in the situation. So when you give your students that kind of power, now the school of pride kind of goes up to another level. So like I said, Harvard could definitely do that. Schools can adopt this massively, and it can be a great revenue stream for a school.
Using Harvard as an example, I think is a good one because it's pretty tangible and everyone's heard of Harvard.
Yeah.
It's like there's two parts of Harvard, and because I grew up near Harvard, and they always said the hardest part of Harvard was getting in, is the access, because a lot of people in the United States and around the world have the middle class money to be able to afford the education. They
Right.
can't get the access, and we've seen that blow up in real time with the whole scandal where parents are paying like $500,000 so their kid can
Just
go to
to go.
Stanford or whatever it was. So it's the access component that's really interesting, and the reason why I love it so much is in my life, the people that have done, I've never met someone
Mhm.
and I'm blown away by what they're doing. And then I directly relate it back to their university
Mm.
because sometimes maybe they didn't even go to college. Sometimes they went to a state school. They didn't have to go to an Ivy League.
Yeah.
So the second you put something on chain with an education, you take some state school from X, Y, and Z, and then you start pumping out amazing grads and they're building stuff in Web3. You start to engage with their product and you're like, wow, where did they go to learn this? Oh, they went there. Then they're going to be able to sell that, and everyone wins. The student wins because they're going to get great stuff. The person wins because now they basically got a free education if we're thinking in monetary terms.
Right.
And the school, the brand, only grows.
It grows.
So I'm just like, have schools come to you and been like, Brent, you need to come through and teach us?
So I've been getting some requests. I've been getting a couple requests. Not academic. The academic industry is very traditional as well, and that's a big thing. One of my students over at Expert VR, he creates these VR training simulators, So he's working his way into it from like an immersion aspect of it. So he's creating these VR training simulators for like police stations and all of people who could use the training without being on the field. And he's been running into some some red tape, just trying to navigate through it, get them to understand what it is. So when you're dealing with academic institutions, you're dealing with very traditional old money. So convincing them that this is the way really can only be done, in my opinion, through practice and through innovators who are working in those institutions that catch on in a sense. And just experimenting with it because it's super possible and it's super easy to do. It's just getting them to understand that this is something that you should be doing. A good example is Disney. One of our advisory board members for JamAround works for Disney, and he's been doing a lot with the Disney, the VV NFTs and stuff like that. So it's Pepsi, another one of our students. Or Doug is not a student, but Brian, he works for Pepsi, and he's one of our students. He's a senior IT executive over there, and they are experimenting with NFTs. And you see what these conglomerates are doing because there's so much regulation that they have to abide by because they're so big. So just seeing how people are navigating through it, we know that there's some more legislation that has to get passed. I just did a Web3 panel a couple of days ago on the Capitol, at Louisiana Capitol, where we were talking about talking to the treasurer about Web3 bills and everything that's actually trying to get passed right now in Louisiana. So it's a lot of that legislation that has to pass in order for these bigger the institutional money to get behind it because they have to be regulated in a sense. So that's where, the centralization, is inevitable. You can't do big money work without being centralized because it has to be regulated to an extent. So we've been exploring the opportunities, but right now I've just been kind of bootstrapping it and just making sure that it's a concept that people like and that it works. And the whole portal was built on Web 2. Just the login was built to Web 3. So it's a traditional Web 2 front end, but then Cypher, our dev, which I don't know his real name either, he built the plugins, custom plugins that allowed you to connect your MetaMask wallet to the website. So super easy setup, super simple setup. It's just a matter of getting the schools on board to want to experiment with it.
This is like so fascinating because I think academia right now is going through it. And I've had conversations recently with one of the guests who came on the pod named Grant. And we've been talking with a professor who's a doctor. He's a doctor in business administration, and he teaches at a college. And I'm not going to share his name here because I can't speak for him. I can speak for Grant, though. And we're just having this conversation about we are getting Web 2 diplomas now in a Web 3 world. And I know personally, I have my master's in international affairs, but now that I'm deep in Web 3, I'm not leaving. I'm only going to continue to invest in this network, in this community.
Yeah.
And it's like, this feels like tools that I'm going to be able to, set me up and add value into the future. And thinking about, I'm really glad that you brought up Vitalik's tweets because I read through them and I read a lot of people else who kind of analyzed them. They did all the legwork, so I didn't have to do it. And it's really fascinating. But what you said about decentralized and centralized is totally true because even Bitcoin, which is in theory, I'm throwing air quotes, decentralized, there's a massive amount of miners that really kind of own the ebb and flow of what that looks like. And then with Ethereum, somebody asked me the other day, I had a Bitcoin maximalist come on and came on episode 21 and we were talking and he said off mic, he said, well, what happens if Vitalik dies? And I don't have an answer for that because I just watched, I don't know if you saw on Netflix. Did you see the thing on Netflix with the dude who was part of the centralized exchange up in Canada? It was kind of like a Canadian Coinbase. I don't want to watch Coinbase.
I gotta watch that.
You gotta watch this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ruin it a little bit for you.
Yeah.
But he dies. And the keys get locked up.
Yeah. You call that key man syndrome. When there's like one person kind of in the center of it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is
And so
true.
I go through Vitalik's tweets, and that's the only thing I'm thinking. And I obviously have Ethereum because I like to play in Web3. I have NFTs. I like to get in on stuff. I like to mint stuff. I think it's something that is, it's a good thing to have in your wallet if you want to play in the sand. Right. And so thinking NFTeacher, how big is it going to go? I've seen that you've done a backpack. I think you started. Did you start with the jacket or the backpack?
The jackets. We started with Gen 1 jacket. We had 100 jackets. We sold those out. And now we're at the backpacks. I think we sold like 40 of them or something like that.
Out of 100?
Out of 300. So,
out of 300.
Yeah. So the rarity levels, we did artificial. We didn't do artificial rarity. So we didn't do the probably rare algorithm because I didn't want to create a project based off of hype. I felt that if I was to hype the project and I was to sell 10,000 assets, then everybody be standing around twirling their fingers. So I wanted to create the project in a way that wasn't FOMO based. So more of a passive project. If I could sell one NFT every 2 days for the next 3 years, I'll take that before I sell all of them in one day and be forced to do premature business decisions based off of these investors who aren't accredited investors, and they just want things to, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it's tricky. Yeah. And that's where it comes to the contradictions of it, because you people aren't investing in you, but then when you're not an accredited investor, you don't really know how the process works. Then you go asking for things too soon and not really knowing. It's so many things that comes with it. That's why when I sold, I wanted to make sure that there was a 10-course class on the other side of that transaction. So where unless you went through all of those classes, you couldn't sit there and think I didn't give you value, or what's next, or you would have to go through all of the content that I pre-prepared for you, and as well as the designs of the jackets. So we did rarity traits, but I didn't release the rarities or even announce them until after all the jackets were sold out. So everybody initially thought that they were all one design, but I didn't put the metadata on chain. Everything else is on chain, but the metadata isn't. So we can update the style of the jackets. We can update the looks of every single token. If I wanted to just drop a profile picture project and replace all of the tokens with profile pictures, that I would be able to do that, because that's not on chain. And then that's also decentralization and centralization. You don't want to put everything on chain because some things you want to change. So it's like certain things like that. So so we doing the backpacks, and they're selling in a nice passive kind of way. I haven't really been promoting them as recently, but they still been selling a few of them. And yeah, it's passive, and it's good because people who come in and get it, they get it for the knowledge. Most get it for the office hours as well. So you get access to the private Discord, where I have a Calendly link where you can schedule office hours with me, like in a traditional university sense. And I've met a lot of the students through video chat and just talking to them, coaching them through things. I charge like $300 an hour for NFT consultation. So if you get the NFT, you get free office hours whenever you want. You just have to make sure you beat somebody else to get the schedule first, which in reality is not even that packed of a schedule. You can literally get one and get on the schedule, and I'll talk to you next week or something like that. And it's passive, and it's in a way that's beneficial. We have different value. We do the airdrop, so you get the Decentralization wearables. If you meant, I actually was working on submitting the backpack wearables before I came over here. So we're going to be airdropping those to backpack holders, and we're going to do an event in Decentraland where we're going to have the people come with the jackets, people come with the backpacks, and just have them, just fraternizing, just being in school, watching, just meeting each other, because there's a lot of people from different walks of lives that are students. And I would tell the students that, talk to your cohort. Go, if you have an NFT and they do too, y'all part of the same community. We have some, like I said, Pepsi executives. We have builders, developers, architects, 3D modelers. Like, there's everything you need in the community to create what you need if you know how to network and meet them. And that was how NFTeacher was created. Like I said, everyone on the founding team for NFTeacher came from the Apes 3D community. And that was because that was a community that I poured value into. So they understood who I was, they trusted me, and they didn't mind pouring value back into me. And that's when you think of Web3 decentralization as more of a give and take, not a take, just, taking and extracting. We're actually, creating a balanced scale of value. And that's, what the fundamental purpose of Web3 is, just, equality.
I recently have been thinking a lot about the Constitution because of the political atmosphere in which we live and some of the decisions that the Supreme Court has made. And you brought up something that to me is always fascinating as I start to build out my own NFT project for this podcast, which is, how do you build something that can weather the test of time and still be kind of flexible? Because where we are today won't be where we are in 3 or 4 years. If I come back to New Orleans and I sit with you, I say, Brent, where are we now? Everything will have changed. There's not even a surprise to me if some Princeton, Stanford, some of the bigger universities who maybe can take some risks because they have $1 billion endowments are starting to do this. Because Stanford, I know that they already have a class in virtual reality because they're like, we need to prepare these students for the future. And the future is probably in a virtual reality, decentralized space.
Definitely.
So how have you thought about, and you just spoke a little bit about keeping, not putting all the metadata on blockchain. How else are you thinking now? Like, what are you thinking now about the project that you couldn't have even considered when you started? And you only started like 5 minutes ago. Right? I mean, like, you just started.
So initially it was more so B2C, so business to consumer. And recently, after going through the program, the accelerator program that I went through, I learned a lot about high growth startups. I competed against the NFT museum project in the competition. I actually beat them, Chris, with iconic moments. Shout out to Chris. And I'm seeing how Web3 businesses are starting to get institutional money and what they're starting to do with it, how they're starting to scale it. So what you do is you build up your brand in order to go get investment, right? And I've been seeing a lot of my favorite brands, even like the MetaKey, they've gotten investment. They're doing more hybrid style investment options instead of just hard cash for equity. You may be buying some tokens, or you may be, doing things like that. But getting investment and scaling is super important right now because the technology is going to change so dramatically in the next 2 or 3 years. So let me try to stay on board with it. So boom, when the web bubble cracked, Web 1 bubble cracked, Amazon went down to from $116 a share to like $6. The only reason why he was able to weather that storm was because
he being Bezos.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Bezos.
Okay.
Yeah, the only reason why Bezos was able to weather that storm was because the business was on an upward trend. So while the market was saying that he was on a downward trend, all of his business stats from everything going on in the operations, it was all trending upward. And the key was he didn't need to raise money. So he had enough runway to get him through those 2 or 3 years of no one's investing in these types of companies. So that's where it comes to where the people come with that 99% of all companies are going to die, because when the bubble pops, if you don't have a cash runway to stay in business, right, then you're going to close your doors. And if the market is down, that means you're not getting any investments from even the consumers of Web3. So people aren't buying NFTs, people aren't investing in tokens. Investors aren't definitely not investing in the companies. So it's just about making sure that you either set your model up to where you don't need a high runway, or you get enough money to weather the storm. So these companies are getting crazy high investments, and they're hiring these expensive employees. So to keep them working, you need to make sure that you have the money. And when the market's down, investors aren't investing, people aren't buying. And that's really what matters. So what I've been looking into recently is been doing a lot of B2B stuff. So it's some stuff that I can't say, but there are some other things that are popping up that is going to be more so institutionalized education. So for different companies who want their people to learn about blockchain, we're going to be doing special tokens. They're going to buy the tokens, give them to their people, and then they're going to get access to X, Y, and Z content.
This makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Because I was 35, and so when the internet came out, my dad had always been working with computers since the 80s. So when the internet came out, that made sense. I was one of the first kids to kind of be baptized in it.
Yeah.
And when I think back to that, if you think back to that time, the only people that really had the money to go play in these things were the institutions, were for-profit companies.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it makes sense that for-profit companies now are going to be reaching out to someone like you or any one of your collaborators or community to say, hey, teach us to see what's going on. The bear market that we are in, I'll officially say it now.
Yeah,
the bear market that we are officially in, and we're going to continue to slide into, and we can talk about prices for days. I think it was Janowitz from Blockworks. Jason Janowitz from Blockworks. Yeah. I think he tweeted it, or it was Coinbase who tweeted it. Maybe it was Brian Armstrong. I'm not exactly sure, but somebody said the best things for Web3 come from bear markets.
Yeah.
And it was like Coinbase in 2014. I'm going to forget all the other ones, but I'll find the tweet and I'll put it up, and you can go find it. It's already on our Twitter at More Than Blockchain. And we're in this bear market now.
Mm-hmm.
What moves are you making now to insulate? Because I'm telling anyone, I'm like, hey, I'm working on this podcast. I'm getting some other things going to Web3. We've got about 2 years until the halving happens again with Bitcoin and the prices start to appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think we'll also be printing money, at least in the United States, and mostly likely in Asia and Europe, and other countries do the same. Are you making different moves now that we're in a bear market?
Yes, I'm moving. When we get in the bear market, I start moving super fast because the price is not going to be the same forever. Let me give you a good example. So when I first minted the wearables for the jackets, so I had to mint 100 wearables. During the time, it was 300 mana to mint a wearable. And mana had skyrocketed around that time. It was at around $4 or $5. So I paid $1,500 to mint those wearables that I gave away to my holders, right? I wound up going to the casino and winning the money back like right after I minted it.
It's like the worst thing for you to say.
Right,
people are like, "Oh, I can just go to casinos and cover my Web3 my Web3 liabilities."
They stopped the blackjack, so I don't know if you could really go. You could do poker, but blackjack, I used to be like really
just getting
it used to be easy because you could just get a dealer card and pull it up and find the best move to throw down. Yeah, it was super easy. I used to be gaming that system all day. But to the point
Oh,
now, so when Mana went to $400, $4, they said that the wearables were now 100 Mana because it was unsustainable. So after I spent that 1,500, they wound up lowering the price to mint your wearables to 100 Mana. So at the time, that was around $300. The price is still 100 Mana right now, and Mana is at $1. So in order to mint in wearable right now, you're only going to pay $100. So if you have wearables that you plan on minting to airdrop to people, like just things are cheap right now. So like get your resources together and start, paying and buying the stuff that you need to buy before the market goes back up, because you don't know how the price is going to fluctuate and how it's going to affect your bottom line. I'm low key happy that I waited until this market to mint the wearables, because I would have been paying around $300 to $400 if I would have did it 2-3 weeks ago. So those are certain things that you pay attention to when builders move in the bear market, is because things are inexpensive to deploy on. Ethereum gas fees are super cheap right now. You have the Solana, they doing their thing. I was in Solana at the top, but now this is an opportunity for me to get my Solana back right, and just this is a time for you to start refocusing on different things and readjusting based off the data that you've been seeing in the last year. So these different companies that have been building during the bear market, that's why I'm an avid believer in Decentraland over stuff like Other Side and all that, because these are battle tested platforms that have been through bear markets before. This is the reason why Decentraland is still only on the desktop, because they still have a mobile application. So that's crazy news that's going to pump them back up. They have VR that's supposed to be coming in the next month or two, as a VR application for Decentraland, like different things that fit the actual time that we're in. A lot of companies will try to overbuild, but the tech stack isn't built for that right now. And these companies that are investing everything into blockchain at this moment are going to be, they're taking on technical debt right now, technology debt. So as they're basically sacrificing the technology in order to get a certain amount of leverage at this point, but they're going to have to pay for that debt eventually once the market consolidates and the technology stacks start consolidating, because they're going to have to move over into these more generalized technology stacks. And that's what happened. You have all of these different technology options. They become outdated. You get the actual industry standard, and then people start moving into that. So a lot of companies that are investing into a lot of these experimental technologies, in about 3 years or 2 years, when things start, becoming more materialized, is going to be more of an effort for them to switch over. For your companies that got the investments, it's going to be easier for them to do, but they're still going to have to pay that back. You're going to have to pay that tech debt back, which is, not a bad thing. You just have to make sure that you're positioned in order to not ruin your company over it.
What's a company that's currently doing that, and what advice would you give them?
As far as a company that's not using their tech debt well, in a sense,
Or a company that's over investing in tech that they may need
yeah,
to in the future abandon.
I feel like Other Side. I wouldn't say I don't like. I wouldn't say that I'm not a fan of Yuga, but I definitely see their game from a startup perspective. Because you create this hype and you get your investment, and after you get your investment, you start trying to deliver, but you're delivering on things that you never delivered on before. And it's not as easy to provide artificial liquidity for a video game as it is for an NFT project. For an NFT project, all you have to do is buy the floor up, go get MoonPay to get some celebrities in on it, and next thing you know, you have a successful NFT project. Gaming is completely different, and onboarding to Web3 is too much of a hassle right now. In marketing, I realized that you lose 20% of your users with every step you add to onboarding process. So if I go from my link in bio to add to the store to add to cart to purchase, I done lost 80% of my potential conversion. With Web3, you're thinking about a 12-step conversion. I was talking to my people at Zed Run at VHS Labs, and they said that it takes, if you don't have a crypto wallet, it takes 13 steps to go from no wallet to actually having a horse. You get me? So there has to be a lot of FOMO to keep you moving down that chain.
And this is why I think, and I was discussing this the other day with somebody, a friend of mine, and she was saying, the reason why, well, it's a fairly obvious statement, but the reason why NBA Top Shop did so well. Because you
Yeah,
could just use your credit card. That's it.
straight up.
And I bought NFTs on Eternity when I had problems with my MetaMask
Mm.
because I could use a card. And I had the money. It wasn't like, I'm not saying
Nah,
please.
but the card is more convenient.
Yeah, it's more convenient.
Yeah.
But please, if you're listening to this, don't go out and buy NFTs with a credit card.
No,
That's
don't.
very bad advice. The NFTeacher will tell you that.
I did that with the Matrix drop.
Did you?
Yes, and they took like $800 something out of my account because I was clicking the button so much, but they returned it to me. I only got one NFT, but I was it was a $50 NFT. I clicked it like 10 times. They took all of that money out. So yeah, don't buy it off your credit card. You know, it'll be times when things will get more, when things will get more consolidated. And it's all about trusting who you're using with those type of situations too. Like who's processing your payments, and do they have access to your non KYC? That's a big thing.
As a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
do you have a past with imparting knowledge, teaching? I've coached soccer for many years,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things I learned as a coach, and this is what you learn as a teacher, or this is what parents learn every single day. Anytime you're
Mhm.
imparting knowledge,
Yeah.
in a kind of a power situation where maybe you know more than the other person,
Mm-hmm.
you end up learning more than they do, and that's actually that's like the cheat code.
That is.
So what have you learned from your students? Like, what's a couple things that students just dropped the hammer and said, hey, and you were like, wow, because I guarantee you've got, and I'm not talking about money, you've gotten more out of this knowledge wise than they have, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just
for sure.
the grasshopper master dynamic.
So one thing that I've learned is, and if you enable the right people, they'll take advantage of the opportunity. And I learned that from one of my students who I gave an Oculus to. He won a giveaway for Oculus Quest 2. And he's been using it like every day. He's gotten so good in the Gravity Sketch app that it's crazy. And you would think that he had it before me, as far as how advanced he got with actually 3D virtual sculpting and whatnot. So that's one thing that I've learned is you enable the right people, they're going to take advantage of it, and they're not going to, ruin the opportunity that you gave them. Also, I realized with some I'm not going to drop the ideas they gave me, but I've been getting some great ideas from NFT projects that students want to actually drop. So not going to go through the ones that aren't dropped yet, but there's this one called Encrypted Guides where they actually created a 2D pixelated character of me and put me in there as like a teacher to instruct them.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah,
I think you shared it.
like, yeah.
I saw that and I was like, that is actually meta.
Yeah, right. That's nice.
Right?
That's dope. And that's interoperable. The reason why NFTs exist is because we want to be able to bring assets from one game to another at the end of the day. So that's an interesting project. And I've learned just the resilience. They moved out. Like one of the business partners, he was in California, I believe, and he went overseas and met with the other partner, which is both of them are students. So they then moved together. I forgot where they were, close to Ukraine or somewhere around there, around that area. And they were working on a project for months, just out there together, and I would consult them, we'd hop on there, I'd get the office hours, we'd talk about it, and just seeing builders that, aren't me, it kind of helps build my perspective of how things should be built, and it helps me learn. And, just advising them on what to do and what not to do just gives me a more broader perspective of blockchain projects, not just from the school perspective. So now I'm thinking about how games work. I'm thinking about avatar projects, just based off of different people that I'm working with and how I'm advising them. You learn different scopes of the industry.
So you've got some students that are over in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about two things. I'm going to ask you a two-part question here, and you can take both
sure.
or not. But the cool thing for me in Web3, because I exist somewhere between Massachusetts, Brooklyn, and Columbia.
Yeah.
And the cool thing for me about Web3 is I can be wherever and still add value, still contribute. And the question I have for you is, one of the questions is like, your students, where are they located?
Mm-hmm.
And where, or just, I guess, more simple question, where is the student that like told you they're from X, Y, and Z, and you're like, no way, I didn't even know that existed. And then also, you can flow into this, but are you trying to put, or is New Orleans, like, how big of a player is New Orleans going to be in Web3? Because when I think of tech, I don't think of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of Web3, I don't think of New Orleans traditionally. I think maybe I think of like Silicon Valley now that, Facebook's called Meta and some of the projects. But, what does that look like? So first off,
First part question for the location wise. So the craziest location that someone told me that they were from would have to be the one that I was just referring to, which I don't really remember the name of it because it was the same place where the Tesla Museum is in Europe. And I got to do that research and get back to you.
We'll put that in the outro notes.
We will put that in the outro notes. Let's do that. So that was crazy. And just one of the same guy, he actually minted. He stayed up all night to mint because he was on the other side of the world. So just seeing that time difference and seeing people dedicated and just engaging, coming to events on different time zones and getting used to the UST and not the UST.
Please not the UST.
Oh my God.
Please not the UST.
What's the not isn't that what it's called? Though the time zone, huh? Isn't that?
Oh yeah, sorry. It could be.
Yeah. But that just
But
the
not
UST,
the
not
UST,
tether.
not the UST.
No, not the UST. We talking about time zones. That's the only UST we acknowledge around here. So so that was that answer. And to talk about the New Orleans and Web3. So we've been doing a lot of work with the Idea Village, New Society, which is a Web3 group out here. And we've also been doing a lot of work with Black Technola. They have some Web3 on board, and they have an actual NFT exhibition at Essence this year during Essence Fest. So that's going to be super huge, and it's going to be about onboarding women, Black women in particular, which is their demographic, into NFTs. And there's this big installation, and this is going to be great. And on the other side, which is the more conservative side, we have been working with people like Tim Williamson, the New Society. They just released an NFT project where I think they've onboarded around 280 at this moment in Web3, and they just want education to be a big part of that as well. So I was actually talking to Tim this morning about a possible partnership with NFTeacher and the New Society launch. So we're figuring out a way, and this probably will be our first B2B partnership where they're going to buy bulk of NFTs and airdrop them to their holders. And I'm going to change the metadata on them and edit probably a New Society badge on the bag or something like that, create another trait for it. And this is where that off-chain comes in handy for being a little bit more flexible when you're dealing with other people and deals. But yeah, so New Society is super big. And when you think NFTs in particular, not necessarily crypto, you think culture. You think art, you think music, you think of everything that New Orleans embodies, which fashion. Is pure, fashion, pure culture, right? And New Orleans is bleeding with culture. I saw this one NFT project that these folks at Cuba did, where they took photos of different culture bearers and minted those, and those sold pretty well, So there's a lot of opportunity for New Orleans in Web3 because New Orleans is one of the few cities that wasn't what I would say, our culture wasn't stripped during the Industrial Revolution. So we didn't get our infrastructure changed. So history is one of our biggest cultural assets because things still look the same. So now we have an opportunity to build on that without sacrificing the infrastructure that brings tourists down, because we don't need big infrastructure to build digitally. So I feel like that's a big point with New Orleans, and the fact that we are a music city, we are a food city, we are a culture city, tourist city. So now we get an opportunity to package New Orleans up and ship it off to other people, instead of just waiting for people to come down here and whatnot. I actually own the name French Quarter in Decentralization on that note, because I was like, once, if I can't get a good plot, it's going to be a time where people start searching for plots based off of real life situations, which is where your Earth 2 platforms and stuff tried to capitalize on. But I feel like those fully decentralized platforms, not saying that Decentraland is fully decentralized, but it's probably the closest thing you're going to get to it, is where we all need to be planning ourselves instead of building our own platforms and trying to get people to come there. It's so hard to onboard already that we're fragmenting user bases, and we're diluting everyone's experiences because everyone wants to be the one that creates the oasis instead of just going get a headquarters here or go get a headquarters there and just contribute to the economies that's already been building over all of these years. So that's pretty much my point with it. And I feel like New Orleans has an interesting place in this situation. We just have to iron it out and then get the locals behind it and get them educated as well, which is another reason why the New Society NFTeacher partnership may be something that we're working out sooner than later.
I feel like sooner than later is always, especially taking advantage of the bear market.
Yeah, for sure.
Where people can get in, and if it's a financial concern, which often it is, I want to switch now, though, and I want to transition into another project you're working on. Called JamAround. Sure. And I know you've had some successful seed rounds, so congrats on that.
Yeah.
And maybe you can speak a little bit about that, but then how you hope to mesh that in
to Web3. Yeah, for sure. So good question. So JamAround is a music career management software. Essentially, we drew inspiration from HubSpot. And we feel like music creators need a centralized, and it's funny we say that, and that's what we're going to get into. They need a centralized place, a non-fragmented platform in order to ensure their authorship protection, in order to ensure that they're meeting quality people, in order to ensure that they have quality people to sell their services to. The music industry before the internet was big business. And that meant that in order to move through the music supply chain, you had to go through a record label. The internet or the music industry was the internet's first victim. So when Napster came along, it deconstructed the entire supply chain, starting with the delivery part of it, which was with Napster. They killed physical albums, which was where most of that money was coming in. So now most of the money in the music industry is developed from the first two parts of the chain. The first being the composition, where the composition right is created, and then the second being a master recording, which is the performance of the official recording of the underlying composition, which is the second copyright that's associated with your song. Now the internet has basically created a situation where there are apps competing for market share in every part of the chain. So you get to recording, you got your Abletons, FL Studios, Garage Bands. Then you go to distribution, you got DistroKids, TuneCore, etc. Then you go to delivery, you got Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, etc. So it's fragmented. So it takes around 8 apps in order for a music creator to move through the entire supply chain. So JamAround is going to be an all-in-one solution that first streamlines the composition process by creating a discovery network as well as a cloud composer, allowing users to create and store melodies on the cloud collaboratively. And we're going to create a peer-to-peer marketplace that's going to allow them to buy and sell music products and services to each other. So when we're talking about the entire ecosystem, all of that is Web 2, right? How do we bridge it into Web 3? By providing decentralized alternatives to our service, our offerings. So for example, if you're creating your lyrics and you're using JamAround to store your lyrics, you may have the first option when we're first building to store it on our service. So if someone were to take the rights to your music and you wanted to sue them or something, you would have to go through JamAround to get that data back. That's centralization. Some people cool with that. Some people, they don't want to be responsible for their own stuff. Some people not cool with that. They want to be responsible for their own stuff. So that's why we would offer them a decentralized alternative to store your lyrics and stuff on blockchain. So now if you want to go take somebody to court or whatever, you can go get the information yourself without having to come through JamAround. So that's the first step in how we plan to decentralize JamAround. And another step is to provide a commerce token in our marketplace. So when we first launch the marketplace, it's going to be a fiat. You only can buy beats, buy features, buy vocals and loops using fiat currency. Then we're going to drop Jam token, which is going to allow you to use Jam to buy and sell music products and services with each other. We've also been working with, some music retailers, huge global retailers, and possibly want to work them into that ecosystem as well. So where you can possibly use Jam to buy instruments and all of that other type of stuff. So the whole thing that I've learned with NFTeacher is you need to create an ecosystem first. So with NFTeacher, I dropped the assets first. Then I created the ecosystem because creating an online school was feasible for me to do. But a lot of companies are falling on the wayside by selling assets first and then not providing the value on the back end. For me, with NFTeacher, it was easy to do, like I said, because it was just a website with learning courses, and I was creating the content. So I didn't have to go pay videographers. I didn't have to go pay none of that. I can create it myself. The difference with that and other companies, especially when you're talking about creating a game, a AAA game easily cost you $100 million. Easily.
I feel like and everything went well.
And everything went well.
You know what I mean? That's
everything went
no one
perfect.
has ever built a house to budget. It goes 20% over.
No,
Literally,
always. And that's why I'm so skeptical with these companies. And that's why even JamAround took the approach as a Web 2 model when we're seeking our investment. And we're going to go hard Web 3 when we seek our official seed round. So we are currently raising a bridge round, which is going to lead us into our official seed round, where we will be able to unlock the $400,000 that we won in a pitch competition. So we don't want to dilute ourselves to oblivion by going get that 800 at such an early stage. So we're doing a family and friends bridge round of around 250 to 350 to get our user base to 15,000, 20,000 users, and to redevelop the app from the web-based application that is at now into a fully native app. And that's a perfect example of tech debt. We took on tech debt by not developing natively, only developing during no code, using a no code solution. And we wound up winning the prize using that MVP. So now we're paying that debt back and rebuilding it natively right now. So
as opposed to going in big,
getting
in debt, diluting all of your equity, and then being beholden to a third party and these expectations that maybe you can, maybe you can't.
Yep, either financial debt or tech debt, and we chose tech debt. And my CTO, co-founder Donovan, he was able to develop it himself. So everything that he did, we didn't have to pay, because I didn't get paid my first year. He didn't get paid either. We owned percentages of it. So we took that debt, and now we're redeveloping it. About to launch in the next couple of weeks with the first iteration of the native version. And we're going to be building our user base, pumping those in for the next 3 or 4 months until we go to raise that official seed round. So that's pretty much where we're at now. And I realized with JamAround that building the ecosystem first is always the smartest thing to do. Because why would you build a token to power an ecosystem that doesn't exist? So we're building the ecosystem first, and then we're going to find the ways to create decentralized alternatives to some of the core services to service people who want decentralized alternatives. Because the reality is that not everyone wants to live in the wild, wild west. Some people like having a police that they could call. Not everybody wants a shotgun at their door because they don't want authority around, because when you're dealing in a decentralized space, now you got to protect yourself. So now you storing your own keys. Now you making sure you're not getting hacked. If you get hacked, you can't tell nobody. It's like, you can't do nothing about it. So once you sacrifice centralization for security, and there are certain pros and cons with each of them. So we want to make sure that as we're building this business, we're educating our investors about Web3, because a lot of investors are blindly investing in Web3 at this moment and expecting you to do all of this stuff now, when the reality is that the tech stack is going to be super different, and all of that money would have, in a sense, been wasted if you were to go all in right now. And then we're looking at ecosystems that aren't being populated. So it's all speculation. You drop 10,000 assets and say you're going to drop a video game. If all 10,000 of your holders played that game, that would not be a successful game. 10,000 users is in video game is not a thing. It's not going to happen. So we're taking that approach with JamAround. We have a hybrid Web 2, Web 3 business model, which we need decentralization because the actual music creators need the consolidation of the services, but also giving them an option to store on chain is still, treading both sides, and it's not like we're going against the grain. We're just providing different alternatives, So yeah.
Who are your competitors in the space?
So we have one competitor. It's a company called Vamper out of the UK, not the UK, out of Australia, I believe. And they started like 7 years ago. They got on the train, heading in the wrong direction. And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't close their doors pretty soon, man. Probably like the next year or something. And they've heard of us, of course. And there's been some slight business jousting going on. They are not from here, but they sponsored an event down here that I wound up speaking at. It's just a lot of stuff going on. But essentially, the approach that they took was the right approach, but they didn't understand the problem. And when you don't understand the problem, then you won't build the solution in the right order, and you're not going to build a solution with intention. You're just giving solutions that you need because you were an artist in the past, but you don't know where this fits at on the supply chain, where you should start, etc. So what we're doing is we're trying to provide a scalable alternative to a music manager. Back in the day when the music industry was big business, 15 to 30% to a manager was scalable. Now the music industry is small business. Independent artists upload 8 times more music than major labels. 15 to 30% gross revenues to a manager is not scalable for small business artists. So they need an app where they can manage their own careers. And that's when we talk about empowerment. And now we're giving people ownership where you can control your entire career in the palm of your hand, which is off the same principles or core values as, Web3 in that sense. So it's not really about whether we're Web 2 or Web 3, because the reality is not all companies need to be Web 3. Maybe you just need to be an honest company. Right. So that's the kind of point we're moving at. It's like, we're going to be honest. We're going to be straightforward about what we do and our values. We're going to have our values and we're going to stick to them. However we deliver that in whichever medium is based off of what we're using for or who we're serving at the time, because people eat different things. So that's, us sticking to our values, but also being flexible enough to see where tech is going and not being FOMO'd into thinking that Web 2 is obsolete. Because it's really an evolution of it, and it's needed in order for Web 3 to even be, deployable.
Wow, this is here. I mean, we could probably do hours for each one, and I think what we'll do is, since NFTeacher is kind of launched and executed, we'll probably come back and focus on JamAround as you start to add in those decentralized components, which I do think Web 3 musicians and artists younger kids who are on SoundCloud who are like, you know what, I also own NFTs. I've already put on my own NFTs. This is where I want to play.
Right.
That seems to be honestly meeting the demand of the future.
Right.
And building for it today. So I want to give you the chance now. And I don't know which ones you're going to shout out, what you want to shout out. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way? Because I found you through Dr. Clips.
Right.
But now we got JamAround, you got NFTeacher. So
Dr. Clips. Dr. Clips on my Instagram. Either hit me up on Instagram is the best way to get directly in contact with me. My email, you can find that on my link trees. You can send me that. You can get an NFT and then schedule office hour. And at that point, I'm just showing up at your doorstep in a sense. So I'm very accessible, So Dr. Clips, my Instagram, TikTok messaging sucks. So do not try to reach out to me on TikTok. It's too clouded with too flooded with too many notifications and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I'm super accessible because that's what it's all about, just being accessible and being a real person, not just standing on some pedestal and just, doing that. So you can reach out to me. I will answer.
I think that's a super powerful thing that you do. And that I love is that you're very out there. You can go through your Instagram. I think in the future, being doxxed or not being doxxed, there's positives on both sides, but thank you for coming in to record today. And I will put all of your links, your Instagram feed and your link tree, your Instagram account and the link tree in the notes on the podcast.
Nice.
So Brent, thanks for coming through.
Man, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Be sure to find Brent on Instagram at Dr. Clips. That's dr.clipz to stay updated on NFTeacher and JamAround. As an episode note, the country Brent was thinking of was Serbia. Be sure to follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain and check out our new website at morethanblockchain.xyz to learn more about the podcast. As always, please subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast and consider sharing the episode with a friend, family member, or even colleague. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.